3-drug protocol begins with a fast-moving anesthetic to render the person unconscious. Initially, that was the barbiturate sodium thiopental. That drug is no longer available in the United States for executions, so it has been replaced with the barbiturate pentobarbital. In a clinical setting, pentobarbital has been given gradually to stop a seizure. The second drug is pancuronium bromide, which surgeons use to effectively paralyze voluntary muscles all over the body, like the eyelids, biceps, and abdominal muscles, so they don't move during surgery. In an execution, pancuronium bromide is given in a dosage high enough to stop not only those muscles, but also the lungs and diaphragm. The third drug is potassium chloride. Doctors use it to treat people with dangerously low potassium levels, which can cause the heart muscles to malfunction. For executions, potassium chloride is given in a dose strong enough to stop the heart completely. All of these drugs are followed by a flush of saline solution to speed the flow of the drugs through the body. With the one-drug method, the sole drug is pentobarbital. In a clinical setting, pentobarbital is given gradually until it stops a seizure. In executions, pentobarbital causes the eyelids to close within seconds. The neurons in the brain stop firing. That then makes the chest wall stop moving, the lungs stop breathing, blood vessels to dilate, and the heart muscles to weaken until the entire cardiovascular system shuts down.
Experts say lethal injection is the most botched of the execution methods. Botched executions are those involving unanticipated problems or delays causing unnecessary agony for the prisoner or reflecting gross incompetence of the executioner. Let's take a look at some botched cases of lethal injections.
Strapped to the execution gurney, Landry's journey to the afterlife was anything but smooth. Just moments after the lethal cocktail began flowing through his veins, chaos erupted as the syringe dramatically made a bid for freedom, splattering its deadly contents across the room. The witness curtain fell, shrouding the scene in mystery for over a quarter of an hour. Amidst the frenzy, a spokesperson for the Texas Department of Correction dubbed the spectacle a blowout and revealed that the execution team embarked on a catheter rescue mission. A groan echoed through the room, punctuating this gruesome intermission. Once the curtains were raised, Landry did not appear to be breathing and did not move again.
McCoy had such a violent physical reaction to the drugs, heaving chest, gasping, choking, back arching off the gurney, etc., that one of the male witnesses fainted, crashing into and knocking over another witness. Did McCoy seem to have had a somewhat stronger reaction? Drugs might have been administered in a heavier dose or more rapidly.
Walker suffered excruciating pain during his execution process as a kink in the plastic tubing going into Walker's arm stopped the deadly chemicals from reaching him. In addition, the intravenous needle was inserted pointing at Walker's fingers instead of his heart, prolonging the execution and intensifying his pain.
The quest to find a suitable vein for Rector's execution stretched into an agonizing 50-minute ordeal. The witnesses, shrouded behind a veil of anticipation, could only listen as Rector's 8 distinct moans punctuated the tension-filled atmosphere. Rector, despite his serious brain damage, assumed an unintended role, that of a reluctant guide, assisting the medical team in their desperate search for a viable vein. It was a bizarre dance of desperation and cooperation, as a team of medical personnel grew in numbers, working in unison on both sides of his body in a macabre choreography. This nightmarish symphony of moans and medical effort, as explained by the administrator of the state's Department of Corrections medical programs, potentially contributed to Rector's sporadic outbursts. The riddle of finding a suitable vein was later attributed to Rector's size and his ongoing use of antipsychotic medication.
Ah, the irony. "I'm still awake," said Robin Leroy Parks just as he was given his lethal injection. But 11 minutes later, following his death, "scary and ugly," were words used to describe Parks' execution by a reporter for Tulsa World newspaper. Parks endured what looked like a waking strangulation. The muscles in his jaw, neck, and abdomen began to react spasmodically. He continued to grasp and violently gag until death came, some 11 minutes after the drugs were first administered, in the words of Michael Raidlet's Compendium of Botched Executions. Tulsa World reporter Wayne Green, an official witness to the debacle, recounted events in the next day's edition under the discomfiting headline, 11-minute execution seemingly took forever. It was overwhelming, stunning, disturbing, an intrusion into a moment so personal that reporters, taught for years that intrusion is their business, had trouble looking each other in the eyes after it was over.
During Wayne Gacy's execution, anesthetic administered via IV crystallized, clogging the drip. Doctors paused, replaced the tube, and resumed the process 18 minutes later, prompting speculation and a temporary curtain closure.
Foster's execution was botched due to the tightness of the leather straps that bound him to the gurney, inhibiting the flow of chemicals into his veins. The coroner entered the death chamber 20 minutes after the execution began, diagnosed the problem, and told the officials to loosen the strap so the execution could proceed. In the meantime, Foster gasped and convulsed, and the blinds were drawn so the witnesses could not view the scene.
As the curtains drew back, Cannon delivered his last words, setting the stage for the final act. Yet, as the execution process commenced, a vein in Cannon's arm gave way, causing the needle to escape its hold. In a moment of dark humor, Cannon, lying back and closing his eyes, declared to the witnessing audience, "It's come undone." The scene was promptly veiled from view by the fall of a curtain, suspending the audience's voyeuristic gaze. After 15 tense minutes, the curtain ascended once more, revealing a weeping Cannon who offered a second final statement before his death.
In Diaz's case, the execution team member did not struggle to locate veins in both forearms. However, this person, either unknowingly or wantonly, pushed the catheters through both veins and into subcutaneous soft tissue, an error that is known in medicine as infiltration. As a result, the drugs flowed between layers of soft tissue in Diaz's arms rather than into his bloodstream. This created large chemical burns. On the right arm, the burn zone was 12 by 5 inches, with numerous blisters and a sloughing off of superficial skin. On the left arm, the burn zone was 11 by 7 inches. The blisters, according to the autopsy report, were filled with watery pink-tinged fluid. By the time the autopsy began, the medical examiner noted there had been extensive skin slippage, revealing white and pink subcutaneous skin. His skin ripped, and he choked for air in worst botched execution ever. 2 days after the execution, Governor Jeb Bush temporarily suspended all executions in the state and appointed a commission to consider the humanity and constitutionality of lethal injections.
In September 2009, Broom walked into the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility expecting to die by lethal injection. 2 hours and 18 puncture wounds later, he walked back to his prison cell alive. Broom is the only person to ever survive an execution in the U.S. During the failed efforts, Mr. Broom winced and grimaced with pain. After the first hour's lack of success, on several occasions Broom tried to help the executioners find a good vein. At one point, he covered his face with both hands and appeared to be sobbing, his stomach heaving. The executioners blamed the problems on Mr. Broom's history of intravenous drug use. Mr. Broom died in December 2020 of COVID-19 contracted on Ohio's death row.
Oklahoma brushed aside cautionary words from defense attorneys, plunging into a chilling portrayal of the executions of Clayton Lockett. The shroud of secrecy veiled the execution blueprints and the untested midazolam drug, veiling crucial elements in an enigmatic haze. Despite a symphony of protests and a tempest of debates, Governor Mary Fallin stood unwavering in her determination to proceed. The stage was set for Clayton Lockett's tragic exit, marked by foreboding omens. The executioner's struggle to find a viable vein painted a prelude of the impending catastrophe. Eventually, an unorthodox groin area vein was tapped into, initiating a disturbing dance of chemical concoctions and impending demise. But the veils of secrecy couldn't eclipse the truth. Lockett remained painfully aware despite the sedative, his body contorting in torment as lethal agents surged through his veins. As the theater unfolded, the blinds were drawn, obscuring the horror from witnesses, who were swiftly ushered away. Lockett's final moments etched themselves in a heart attack, casting a tragic curtain upon a flawed execution that dared to test the boundaries of ethics and legality.
In a grotesque display, the administration of lethal chemicals, midazolam and hydromorphone, turned into a horrific spectacle as Mr. Wood's execution lingered for a shocking 1 hour and 40 minutes before he was declared dead. Throughout the nightmarish ordeal, his attorneys desperately sought legal intervention, even appealing to Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy to halt the botched execution, but to no avail. Astonishingly, the Arizona Attorney General's office claimed that Mr. Wood, despite his gasping, was merely asleep and snoring. The events leading up to this gruesome scene were riddled with legal battles, with defense attorneys initially winning a stay from the U.S. Court of Appeals, demanding the disclosure of drug sources and executioners' training. Tragically, the Supreme Court later overturned this stay. A journalist who witnessed the horror, Michael Kiefer, recounted an appalling 640 gasps emitted by Wood before his agonizing demise.
In a rare move, Ohio Governor John Kasich, a Republican who previously rejected Alva Campbell's request for clemency, issued a temporary reprieve after the inmate's medical team failed to gain intravenous access. About 80 minutes after the execution was scheduled to begin, the 69-year-old Campbell shook hands with 2 guards after it appeared the insertion was successful. About 2 minutes later, media witnesses were told to leave without being told what was happening. The execution team first worked on both of Alva Campbell's arms for about 30 minutes and then tried to find a vein in his right leg below the knee. Prison officials brought Campbell into the death chamber in a wheelchair and provided him a wedge pillow on the gurney, which was meant to help him breathe. Campbell has suffered from breathing problems related to a long-time smoking habit. His attorneys said he has required a walker, relied on a colostomy bag and needed breathing treatments 4 times a day. Less than 4 months later, Campbell died on death row of his terminal medical conditions.
In 2018, Doyle Leham was punctured at least 11 times in his lower legs and groin before the Alabama Department of Corrections called off the execution attempt after failing to find a usable vein for the lethal injection. Despite several warnings from defense counsel that it would be impossible to find a vein in which to insert the catheter, Ham suffered from advanced lymphatic cancer and carcinoma. The state went forward with the execution. For 2.5 hours, the executioners tried to find a vein, leaving Ham with 10-12 puncture marks, including 6 in his groin and others that punctured his bladder and penetrated his femoral artery. At one point a large amount of blood began to accumulate in the region of Mr. Ham's groin. The blood soaked a pad or drape, and another one was applied. During this time Mr. Ham began to hope that the doctor would succeed in obtaining access so that Mr. Ham could get it over with, because he preferred to die rather than to continue to experience the ongoing severe pain. 3 years later, Mr. Ham, still in prison, died from his lymphoma and cranial cancer.
Amidst a backdrop of legal challenges, the execution of Mr. Grant in Oklahoma unfolded in nightmarish fashion. The initial administration of midazolam triggered violent convulsions and vomiting, with his body racked by almost 24 jerking motions before vomit spewed forth. Autopsy findings revealed pulmonary edema and tongue hemorrhaging, underscoring the brutality. Grant's legal team had warned about such agony, joining the chorus of voices questioning the 3-drug protocol. Robert Dunham of the Death Penalty Information Center criticized the state's apparent disregard for the potential outcome, echoing the sentiment that both Oklahoma and the Supreme Court appeared unmoved by the impending torment.
In a bizarre execution, Mr. Atwood's quest for a suitable vein turned surreal. Witnessed by reporter Jimmy Jenkins, the spectacle left him stunned. With a degenerative spinal condition, Atwood, 65, was wheeled in a wheelchair into the execution chamber. After multiple failed attempts by the execution team to locate a vein, the needle found its place in Atwood's hand following his own recommendation, preparing the stage for his death.
In a twisted tale, Governor Kay Ivey disregarded pleas from the victim's family and ordered a controversial execution of Joe Nathan James, Jr. The scheduled time of 6 p.m. stretched into a bizarre 3-hour delay attributed to Ivey issues. A private autopsy later debunked the official claims, revealing botched attempts to set up an intravenous line. The execution became an absurdity, with clothing inspections for reporters, unexplained van confinements, and finally, an execution with questionable methods where James lay motionless, unresponsive, then blinked after injection. A murky sedation debate followed. The autopsy unraveled a horror show, multiple failed 4 attempts, puzzling punctures, and unskilled cut-downs pointing to gross incompetence. The absurdity continued with contradictory statements, leaving doubt about James' consciousness and sedation. The autopsy findings painted a picture of unqualified executioners resorting to outdated methods. Was it incompetence or an absurd cocktail of errors? Reporters witnessed a drama stranger than fiction, leaving an unsettling mark on the realm of justice.
In Alabama's execution theater, chaos reigned. Alan Eugene Miller's nitrogen hypoxia plans vanished like a magic trick gone wrong. After legal somersaults, the Supreme Court's 5-4 flip-flop left them scrambling. Execution commenced, but Miller endured needle acrobatics for 90 minutes, turning a gory spectacle into an unpleasant farce. Not to be outdone, Kenneth Eugene Smith's botched affair played out like a tragicomedy. 4 hours of gurney gymnastics, desperate jabbing, and dubious execution procedures took center stage. Amid the calamity, Alabama's governor, Kay Ivey, declared a timeout, blaming activists and criminals for the circus, while the execution chamber curtain closed, leaving a bewildering mess.
Uncertain drug sourcing, age, and potential impurity of the drugs in lethal cocktails raise concerns among experts. Lethal injection durations vary with chemicals and inmates' physiology. Swift deaths are reported with barbiturate followed by a paralytic and heartstopper, but drug substitutes can cause prolonged executions due to drug shortages and bans. Inmates Justin Lee May, Scott Don Carpenter, Bert Leroy Hunter, Dennis McGuire, Ronald Burt Smith and Tory McNabb are just a few that faced an unusually violent reaction to the lethal drugs that included severe gasping, moaning, coughing, snorting, chest heaving, choking, muscular spasms and back arching off the gurney, violent gagging, thrashing, struggling against restraining straps and more. Inmates face vein-vexing challenges during execution, sometimes undergoing unsettling cut-downs sans anesthetics. Are these executions uncomfortable? Definitely. Is this a torture? Nah, they chose this fate. Was justice served? Absolutely. But hold up, do you care about their execution pain? They're convicts, not saints. Remember the victim's agony? What are your thoughts?